Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 2 is just around the corner, and after 18 long years, MGS4 has finally been freed from the PlayStation 3.
Free from Fox Die. Free from the system. Free from ID control.
Making its way to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch and PC. Naturally, fans of this prestigious series are incredibly excited to see this masterpiece, a game that by all rights probably should have never existed in the first place, finally returns.
We're freaks who never should have existed.
Its meme still lives on nearly 2 decades later, passed down to an entirely new generation who now get the chance to experience the legendary closing chapter of Solid Snake's story for themselves. So this video is for the veterans who might need to shake off some of that rust and rediscover some of the game's incredibly immersive features, but also for newcomers who want a good idea on what to expect and how to get the most out of their first playthrough. Metal Gear has always been a series obsessed with the smallest detail, experimentation and secrets, and MGS4 is no exception. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if there are still features that some of us old-timers have never still discovered. This is a game that rewards curiosity in almost every single form. So if you're new, let your imagination run wild, because underneath MGS4, nearly 20-year-old exterior is an incredible amount of freedom, hidden mechanics and attention to detail just waiting to be messed around with.
Suddenly, there was intense light all around me. When I came to, I was home.
So before you even start the game, one thing I'd recommend checking first is the mission briefing option on the main menu down below. MGS4 has 5 briefings throughout the game, but the first is strangely easy to miss because it doesn't automatically play when you begin Act 1. It gives you some important context going into the story, so newcomers especially should give it a watch before jumping straight in. Although do be warned, cutscenes are very long in this game, and you may want to sit back and relax and grab a few snacks because you're in for a cinematic ride. But there's another reason what the briefings are worth paying attention to, because during 4 of them you can actually control the Mark II and freely explore around the Nomad whilst everyone's talking. There are hidden items, ammunition, and a few surprisingly obscure interactions scattered around the ship, and if you're familiar with the other games in the series, they might ring a bell. Later on, once you've unlocked Face Camo, you can even return to certain briefings and ram the Mark II into characters like Campbell or Otacon to unlock their faces for Snake to use later on. It's a great way to break away from the cutscenes and be able to still have some gameplay, considering that the cutscenes are actually a lot more lengthier than the gameplay itself. With all of that being said, by the time you've watched the first briefing and actually go into the game, things will start to make a little more sense, as the game actually throws you straight into the battlefield that allows you to get comfortable with the controls and the overall movement. Then you're forced to escape some bipedal autonomous cow robots that you'll come accustomed to later in the game. Why? Well, because Hideo Kojima.
Gecko! We've got Gecko!
So by the time you've even made it into the gameplay after that very brief segment, you get thrown into another cutscene, ironically set before the mission briefing I've just told you to watch. Like I said, MGS4 is a very cinematic driven game, since it's the last entry in the series. And truthfully, this is why it's often critiqued for often not having much gameplay and too many cutscenes compared to the rest in the series that seems to balance it just right. That said, it is to be praised for the level of cinematic quality that these cutscenes offer to really get immersed into its story. So once you actually finally make it into the gameplay on the battlefield, one of the first systems worth understanding properly is your OctoCamo. Unlike MGS3, you're not constantly digging through menus changing uniforms. Snake's suit adapts like a chameleon to whatever environment you may be pressed against. Your camo index tells you how well you're blending in, and the higher the percentage, the harder Snake is to spot by the enemy. And with the right positioning, you can push it surprisingly close to 99% without even relying on stealth camouflage. Later on, Face Camo adds an extra layer to this by allowing Snake's face to blend in as well and giving your camo index a slight boost. You can also instantly clear the camouflage pattern and return the suit to normal rather than waiting to find another surface. On motion supported controllers, this is traditionally done by shaking the controller, although the exact input may differ depending on platform, but will no doubt be available for PlayStation and perhaps maybe Switch. And from experience, using the PlayStation 5 controller on the emulator seems to work just fine as well. I'm not too sure about Xbox. Then we have the next set of tools that are really useful, and this is how Snake reads the battlefield. The threat ring is the faint circle that forms around Snake whenever danger is nearby. The distortions in the ring point towards nearby enemies and threats, giving you a rough idea of where something is even when you can't physically see it. It's subtle, but once you start paying attention to it, it becomes incredibly useful when moving through tight areas or trying to stay hidden without constantly stopping to aim around every corner. Then you've got Solid Eye, which is essentially Snake's all-purpose reconnaissance tool. In normal mode, it helps just identify enemies, weapons and points of interest. It even tells you their emotional moods. It even gives you information on the weapons they're carrying. And you also get night vision, which makes targets and footprints and useful objects much easier to pick out in darker environments. However, there is one drawback that comes to using this. If you're close by to an enemy, they can hear the night vision, so make sure that you turn it off when you get too close to an enemy.
It's the Solid Eye! The sound is giving your position away.
Cigarette smoke?
It's also worth remembering that the Solid Eye runs on battery power, sadly not solar, so there's no reason to leave it switched on constantly. So let it rest now and then and recharge naturally, and you can increase its battery capacity as well by finding hidden batteries during some of the mission briefings. Used together, the threat ring and the Solid Eye give you a ridiculous amount of information without ever really needing a traditional radar. Even with that said, you still do have the radar in the top right hand corner with your camo index. Altogether just gives you the tools you need to actually be really stealthy as the game intends you to be. Something we've never been accustomed to in the series is Snake's physical and mental condition through the stress and psyche systems, and they have a bigger effect on gameplay than you first might realise. Stress builds naturally throughout combat, such as extreme environments, carrying too much weight, and generally keeping Snake under pressure for long periods. Let's not forget, the guy is getting old. Once it starts climbing, his psyche begins to suffer, which can make aiming less stable and reduce his overall effectiveness in the battlefield. The idea is to try and avoid combat whenever possible, and Mgs4 really encourages player to take Snake's health into account. The easiest way to bring things under control is to simply just slow down, find somewhere safe, crouch or lie prone and give Snake a moment to recover, essentially get out of the battlefield. Even the cardboard box helps reduce stress faster, because apparently hiding inside one is still Snake's idea of therapy, and it is mine too. There are also items that interact with these systems so you can actually help Snake. Pentamin, which is like a derivative to benzodiazepine, which can't be used for legal reasons, steadies your aim so you can aim much better because stress lowers your stamina gauge, which causes you to have tremors. The compress helps as well because Snake gets back pain, and this improves his recovery when he's crouch walking, and while cigarettes can calm him down, it comes at a cost of some of Snake's health. And if stress gets extremely high during heavy combat, Snake can actually enter a temporary combat high, giving him a short burst of improved performance before the inevitable crash afterwards, which can cause him to faint and collapse. The good news is that there's several items to be found to support Snake if his stress is too high, like noodles, rations, regain energy drinks, and something called Munia, which is like a natural healing herb. The game heavily prioritizes keeping Snake in good health, so much so that later on through the game you even get your own personal counsellor that will calm Snake down, and I'm sure you guys understand why.
Hey, I don't let my mental state affect my combat efficiency.
Much to bear.
The best thing to happen in the series started in Metal Gear Solid 3 with a combat system known as CQC. MGS4 makes this into one of the most useful systems to get comfortable with very early on. You can grab soldiers, you can throw them in different directions, you can choke them out, you can slit their throats, and my personal favourite, being able to use soldiers as human shields to prevent other soldiers from attacking you, giving you a chance to make your next move. You can even hold them up and force them to surrender. Held up enemies can also be searched for extra items rather than dragging and dropping them like before. It's definitely worth remembering if you're trying to squeeze everything you can out of an area, such as items and ammunition.
That's all I've got.
Non-lethal weapons also go far beyond the standardized tranquilizer pistol as well. You've got stun grenades, you've got V-ring shotgun ammunition, the Moisant Nagant, which is really effective from long range, and once you've completed the game, you unlock the emotion rounds that are based off the bosses in the game. So by the time you start a new game plus, you can make enemies laugh, cry, rage, or completely lose their composure, and even attack their own men. MGS as the series has a big pacifist stance, so much so that it often rewards the player for approaching the game non-lethally.
You enjoy all the killing, that's why.
Which even still in a game like MGS4 that is probably the most combat driven with guns, still incentivizes the player by rewarding them with endgame unlockables for not using lethal rounds or any healing items. And this goes for avoiding enemy detection altogether without triggering a single alert. If you want rewards like the bandana and stealth camouflage, the solar gun, or the higher ranking emblems, these are the things you must do. Even some of the stranger equipment has practical uses as well. The syringe, for example, can be used against certain enemies, while empty magazines can be thrown to distract guards and quietly pull them away from where they need to go. In a semi-open world, MGS4 gives you a huge amount of freedom in how you approach a situation, and sometimes the smartest move isn't fighting nobody at all, but avoiding combat altogether, despite the game's message on the war economy and commentary on conventional shooter games in that era of the mid-2000s. One of the best things that appears in Metal Gear Solid 4 between Act 1 and 2 is the battlefield system, and arguably a lot of people wish to see this throughout the rest of the game. But it isn't simply split between Snake and a room full of enemies. In Acts 1 and 2, local militia and rebel forces are often fighting against the PMCs, and depending on how you behave, they can become useful allies rather than another problem to deal with. However, you do have to become familiar with them, and just as a fair warning, you can't get accustomed with the PMC soldiers to have them on your side, only the rebels. Helping them in combat, taking out PM soldiers and such, or even giving them recovery items can gradually improve their attitude towards Snake. Once they trust you, they'll stop treating you as a threat, and in some cases they can even hand over supplies or useful items themselves. And that's to say, if you haven't made friends with them and you prove yourself worthy in battle, you can eventually win them over and they will join your side. There are also disguises tied to these factions, which can make moving through certain areas much easier without having to crawl through every inch of the map. Just remember that the factions in Act 1 and Act 2 are separate, so being everyone's favourite mercenary in the Middle East doesn't suddenly make you a celebrity in South America. It's also worth paying attention to that the fighting itself, gunfire, explosions and general battlefield chaos can mask your movement. It's the perfect opportunity to slip past unnoticed whilst everyone else is busy shooting at each other. MGS4 doesn't always expect you to clear a battlefield, though sometimes it's the easiest route is simply letting everybody else do the work for you, unless you want to get involved yourself and you can actually clear different districts and areas, but do bear in mind you can't clear every single area in the map.
Here. You sure?
In MGS4, guns are taken very seriously. In fact, a lot of the names are properly licensed as well. Eventually you'll meet Drebin the gun launderer at the very start of the game, and nearly almost every weapon lying around the battlefield effectively becomes money. The first time you collect a weapon, Drebin registers and unlocks it for Snake, and after that, picking up duplicates automatically converts them into Drebin points. So even if you already own something, it's usually worth grabbing another one as you pass to get extra points. And any weapons that you do find that are locked, you can actually pay Drebin points to unlock them to use in the battlefield. And there's another detail that the game barely explains. The condition of a dropped weapon affects how much Drebin pays for it. Guns taken from the dead or unconscious soldiers are heavily reduced in value, whilst forcing an enemy to drop their weapon through a hold-up can give you the full payout. So if you're deliberately farming points, sometimes robbery really is financially the responsible option. And before spending everything immediately, remember that Drebin runs discounts with his store that drops around 20% on Wednesdays and Sundays in real time, based on your system's date. So whenever you're on console or PC, just be sure to switch the date to get these percentages off your next purchase. That said, Act 5 gives you a much larger 50% discount, so expensive purchases are generally better left until later. There's also a very easy 100,000 Drebin points hidden in Shadow Moses. When you're asked to enter the old security code, typing 14893 gives Snake a little cash grab.
I finished unlocking the door on the first floor. It should open now.
If you want to take things further, there are even dedicated farming spots throughout the game, including the confinement facility in Act 2 where certain PMC weapons can be repeatedly harvested for sizable payouts. This also includes in Act 4 when you make it to Shadow Moses, you can use Rex to harvest all the different geckos you take out, and there's plenty of them. Even in Act 5 you can take out endless swarms of dwarf gecko just to ensure all the points you've gathered will be available for your next playthrough. There's several ways to make Drebin points, even something as simple as using the flashback sequences where you tap the button appointed to see flashbacks throughout the series, will reward you a Drebin points at the end of each chapter. This also includes finding memorable spots within the game or secret locations that will give you Drebin points as well. If you look in store, you will see that Drebin sells something called the Tanegashima. It's ridiculous. It's a 1 in a million point antique musket that under the right conditions can summon a tornado that makes soldiers fly into the air and drop all their equipment, and let me tell you, there is tons of it on the floor for you to collect. Because apparently that's what responsible military spending looks like. It's a lot of money. And of course if you get to Act 5 it is literally half the price and you can buy it for 500,000, so make sure you save up your points. And while weapons are probably not the most obvious thing worth collecting, Mgs4 hides plenty of useful equipment whose purpose isn't nearly as obvious as starting with some of the stranger items sitting in Snake's inventory. Use the iPod. It might look like a bit of a late 2000s product placement, but some of the music you collect actually gives you gameplay bonuses whilst it's playing. Tracks are hidden throughout every act, so it's worth exploring rather than treating them as simply as just collectibles. A few are very particularly useful. Rock Me Baby and Sailor both improve Snake's life recovery, making them great when you're trying to recover. It makes for a better alternative if you're going for a big boss run that requires you to use no rations. This doesn't affect your end result if you're trying to heal. So just find somewhere safe, lie flat on the ground and let Snake recover whilst the music does the work. Beyond the Bounds increases the stun damage dealt by non-lethal weapons as well, while opening Old LA 2040 improves Snake's accuracy. There's also the Police Notes End title. If you grab an enemy in CQC whilst playing it, the enemy will simply fall asleep. And let's just say if you eventually manage to earn the Big Boss emblem, you unlock the appropriately named Big Boss track, which combines two useful effects by improving both Snake's accuracy and his non-lethal stun damage. And there's even a hidden use for the Oshi 2 Han. During the Beauty and Beast fights, if you wait long enough during the Beauty phase, the white photo-style arena to appear, play the song, and the Beauty will actually stop fighting and start dancing. There are plenty more hidden songs around the game, with effects ranging from manipulating the enemy's emotions to improving Snake's abilities, so if you see an iPod track just sitting somewhere off the main route, be sure to grab it. Typically, the MGS series rewards you heavily for going beyond simply finishing the story with some of its best equipment locked behind specific challenges. Once you defeat Laughing Octopus, the first boss you'll encounter, Snake gains access to Face Camo. The Beauty and the Beast members each have their own Face Camo as well. Once you reach the Beauty phase, defeat them non-lethally by draining their Psyche rather than their health, and their face becomes available for Snake to use.
You looking for a real man?
Those boss fights are also important if you want the solar gun. There are 5 hidden figurines connected to the Frog's encounters and the 4 Beauty and Beast bosses. Complete the required fights non-lethally, and remember to actually collect each figurine afterwards, get all 5 and the solar gun becomes yours. And some of the game's best rewards are tied directly to how cleanly you complete an entire playthrough. Finish with 0 kills and you unlock the bandana, which gives you infinite ammunition on future runs. Finish with 0 alerts and you unlock the stealth camouflage, allowing Snake to become almost completely invisible. And if you eventually take everything you've learned into the boss extreme and earn the big boss emblem, you unlock the Patriot along with Big Boss's face camo, essentially the game's reward for proving you've mastered it. Doing all of this and completing the game under 5 hours will you be able to achieve these items. However, even if this is your first playthrough, it's worth thinking ahead. A little restraint during the bosses and some careful exploration can save you another entire run for later. As I mentioned before, Mgs4 is packed with smaller secrets that are very easy to miss, so curiosity is key. For those who love collectibles, there are 40 different emblems to earn overall, ranging from deliberately terrible playstyles all the way up to Foxhound, and ultimately Big Boss. You can satisfy the requirements for several emblems during the same playthrough, although the highest ranking one becomes your main title. The game tracks things like alert phases, continues, recovery items used, and your overall completion times. So if you're interested in a higher rank, it's worth paying attention to these statistics from the beginning. And at the end of each chapter of the playthrough will give you your results. An important distinction is caution is not the same as an alert. Guards can become suspicious and search a new area without necessarily ruining a no alert run. It's the actual alert phase that you need to avoid. And that should give you a solid foundation before jumping properly into Metal Gear Solid 4. There are plenty more hidden interactions and strange mechanics and little details buried throughout the game that I'm sure you'll find. Mgs4 rewards curiosity, and half of the experience is discovering what happens when you push these systems. The next video will be focused entirely on the boss extreme difficulty run, breaking down each section of the game. This just includes the fastest routes, useful skips and non-lethal strategies, all under a 5-hour window. So if that sounds useful, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. It really genuinely helps these videos reach more people, especially with Master Collection Volume 2, bringing a whole new wave of players into the series and this community itself. Whenever you're returning after nearly 20 years of experiencing Guns of the Patriots for the first time, all I can say is enjoy it. Just take your time, experiment, and see how much this game still has hidden underneath the surface, and just let your curiosity take charge. And as always, until we meet again, see you later.
It's